for Yang.
Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds! So nerds!
Hello, nerds!
Now with this campaign, bang, dang, it's and Drew, come roll with the Yang Gang.
Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds! I never thought I'd get to say that live.
Oh shit, dude, Arez, you did it. You did a fantastic job, and you are on the very first Nerds for Humanity kind of like panel conversation with people who've been following the channel for a while, and you're a member, so thank you for supporting the channel. It definitely kind of helps us stay motivated and kind of try and raise our game in terms of growing the channel over the long run. So I appreciate the support, man.
I appreciate the work that you do. I appreciate everyone part of this movement. I think I'm supporting a couple of different Patreons. Scott Santins was the first one that I discovered and immediately jumped on that, and love the content that you've been producing.
I love it, man. I see Landline just says, greetings, world. He's another member. Landline, are you sure you don't want to join the party? You want to join? Dude, so all you need to do, Landline, is if you do want to join, I know you said in the past, like, oh, I'm not sure I'm super tech savvy. Like, it literally, if you can watch the stream, you could probably join the stream, because all I'll do is email you a private link to join the stream as a guest. So Landline, if you want to, go ahead and email me, Tom at nerdsforyang.com, and I'll shoot you an invite. And then after a few minutes, if no other members show up, we'll see if any just good old subscribers and fans of the channel. Oh, how? Okay, so Landline, here's what you need to do. A Landline's saying, how do I do it? So email me, Tom at nerdsforyang.com. So just Landline, just email me and say, hey, this is Landline. How do I join? And then I'll reply with a link to a secret link. And when you click on it, I'll see you and I'll bring you in and we'll have a conversation, man. All right. In the meantime, while I wait for Landline to email me, Arez, why don't you introduce yourself? What are you comfortable sharing about, why you're in the stream and your journey into the Nerds for Yang / Humanity Nation?
All right. Well, I don't think it's, it's probably a similar origin story as many Nerds for Yang disciples, introduced on Joe Rogan podcast and sort of eyes opened and got excited about a better hope. But we connected, I think it was over 6 months ago, maybe even more than that. And, there's this optimism of what could this really be. And it's such a long shot, and it was, but it just kept feeling real, and got more and more excited. The more I talked about it, the more I got people turned on to it, the more I read. And, I just feel super inspired up until through Andrew dropping out and everything that's happened since, and with Humanity Forward, which I'm so happy to see continue and pushing forward. And I'm excited to see what Andrew's next chapter is. Obviously, it's in strange times right now, so we'll see how this alters the course of history and Andrew's history as well. But I think this is a time more than ever that we need those types of voices, that type of pragmatism to think about solutions, and I'm excited to be part of that.
Yeah, I just looked in my calendar, and you and I first connected in June of 2019. I mean, that's damn near almost a year ago. I mean, you were an early adopter of the so it was shortly after Rogan. It sounds like that big. You're part of that, as I was, the post Rogan cohort.
Yeah. Who'd heard of Andrew Yang before then?
Yeah, and I remember we were pretty kind of intrigued is probably the word I would use by Andrew. And I don't know. I'm curious. Like, what was your journey like from June of 2019 to, let's say, December of 19? And of course, we know things took a turn in January of 20.
Well, it's funny. I just like thought of a funny thing. So I think one of the things I asked you about, because probably similar to you at the time, we both work at a very big tech company. And generally, I would say in like the corporate workplace, you like separate politics and religion. And so I was a little bit hesitant to talk about Andrew, and certainly not proselytize, but even to talk about certain topics and bring him up. And I think it was right after that that the math hat dropped. And that's when I was like, oh my God, this is it. I can just wear the math hat and it's ambiguous, but people are gonna be like, oh, math. And I'll be like, yeah, you know Andrew Yang, right? And then that brought people into the conversation. And I mean, that was my journey for up until now. It was just making sure people knew about him. Name recognition and awareness was his probably biggest challenge, and then getting people to give him a serious look. And so getting people excited, and I got many people excited. I remember like looking at my Facebook because I invited everyone to like his page, and no one did right away. But over time, I kept looking, and it was like, from 5 to 10 to 15 to 20, and then like I think close to 50 of my friends eventually liked his page, which was to me a good sign, and getting people to his fundraisers and things like that. But I think looking even beyond, it's like, what are the causes? And I think within Humanity Forward, like one of the ones that I'd love to talk to you about, I messaged you about it earlier because of the 3 pillars of Humanity Forward, right? It's UBI. It is, I don't remember there's a second one that I'm blanking on right now, but the third one is data as a property right. And this is one that I have struggled with for a long time to really wrap my head around. And given what I see as sort of some of the negative downstream effects, potential effects of that policy, and how it would really be implemented and keep the internet open and free. So I don't know how much you've thought about that, discussed that, have that
about the data as a right and ownership of data.
Yeah.
That's a delicate one. You
can put a pin in that one for now.
It's how would so I need to be careful on that one, because obviously, well, let me first say that this channel is my personal channel. Anything I say on this channel has not been reviewed, approved, any connection to my employer. And so this is just me on my personal time talking about things that I care about personally outside of work. So with that said, I mean, I do think that data is extremely, like, we can all agree that data is extremely valuable. It's extremely powerful. And people probably are not as aware, or maybe they're not participating in the value creation as much as they could. And secondly, they may not even be aware of how valuable their data is. And thirdly, it's not clear what they can do about it if they are aware and they're like, yeah, I want to participate more. And I think a lot of people in industry would argue, well, that's how you get stuff for free. I mean, that's why so much stuff on the internet is free, because it's funded by advertising, and you can just assume that advertising is using a lot of data. So I think on the one hand, I feel like, well, we as consumers benefit a lot from indirectly through all these free ad-funded services. But I also think, like, what's most interesting is that very few other people in DC are even talking about it, regardless of what position you are. Like, a lot of senators, I don't even think they would even have a view on it. They would be like, what do you mean data?
Yeah, I agree. And I completely agree that something is broken right now. It's a reason things have come to a head in that area and regulations. there's just a thought in my mind. I think there needs to be a more explicit trade-off of, you know, attention with ads or data for something, for content usually, but or something else, and that needs to be an explicit trade-off with, you know, an explicit opt-in from a user to sort of receive that that benefit for what they are giving up, whether it's their time and attention or some data about them.
Yeah, well, so you know, it's a related thread that came up in, I did a Nerds Against Corona where I was doing all this like data visualization about the spread and everything like that. And someone was saying in the comments, hey, when you're sharing your screen, you're showing these charts, can you use an ad blocker? And on the one hand, I totally get it, because there's these like blinking bright ads that like you're trying to look at this chart. On the other hand, like, well, I mean, like, we have access to this chart because this, you know, whatever it is, you know, the CNN or some organization is publishing this, and they're trying to recoup some of their costs with those ads. And so I think, you know, like, I wonder what would happen if we as citizens said, no, we want more control over our data. You can't do all this stuff with it like you used to be able to. But then we lost access to a bunch of the free services. Like, I don't know if we would be down with, you know, everything that's free now. A lot of things that are free now suddenly like behind a paywall.
Yeah, to me, like, my concern there is that sort of you know, fragmentation almost of society. Like, rich people can opt out of ads, have more of their free time back, have their data not be used because they can pay for that service like a Netflix, and everyone else that can't afford it is sort of inundated with the, you know, the time that it takes to watch ads, their data being used potentially. And so that's like the more downstream and a little bit more philosophical sort of concerns that I have about, like, what does this turn the internet into, of like the rich versus the poor internet. But I think there's some smart people thinking about this stuff, not just Andrew, and you know, something that I want to actually stay involved in and potentially be able to guide and be involved with as well.
Yeah, that sort of income inequality thing, when it comes to data, like if you played that out and you're like, okay, well, if you're really wealthy, you can pay and you can basically like afford to protect your privacy. And if you're not, then you have to basically give up a lot of your data and see a lot of this targeted advertising. I guess if you play that out though, like, what's the alternative? Do you say, like, how else will those lower income folks get access to those services if they're not going to give up their data and they don't have money to pay for it?
Well, now it's almost democratized. Like, everyone has their data used, right? Like, you can opt out of ads on certain websites, but you can't really opt out of your data being used easily. So the rich and the poor are both in that same boat. But we get to a place where people can opt out. And then there's I'd say, like, one other level of this, or one other layer, is that if rich people opt out of this data, and there's people talk about these data pools. And so if rich people opt out of these data pools, that makes the data pool less valuable to an advertiser or to anyone else. And so if you think about, like, giving checks to people for their data, the people that are getting checks are actually getting, it's like a healthcare sort of like insurance pool, where you have the people who's are, however, I don't know what the terminology is for the insurance side, but they're less valuable to advertisers. And so if they're getting checks, it's actually not that much.
Yeah. So you're saying if the higher income people opt out, now the data pool is less valuable to the advertiser. And then basically those lower income folks will then probably have less valuable services available to them for free, because then the publisher isn't going to be able to cover their costs.
Or they get their services, but if the idea turns into, like, a check is sent to you by the folks that are
Mm-hmm.
using your data, like that check looks lower because the end value to the
Yeah.
advertiser is lower.
Yeah. So like if you I mean, I haven't looked into Humanity Forward's proposal on this. Like what are they advocating?
I didn't see much, honestly. I didn't
Yeah.
look for it though. I just saw that that was one of the like three pillars that they were focused on, and I think it is a super important topic, and it's a great entryway for them to go and actually educate, politicians and senators, and potentially make this an issue that they care about. Especially as we just think about privacy in general, not how do you monetize the internet in a privacy safe way, but more how do you protect people's privacy. And I think that's uh, very, very critical, especially as we see this bifurcation by country, you know, by continent, by state.
Mm-hmm. Well, since you brought it up, let's take a look at the Humanity Forward site together. I honestly have not had time to spend much time on it. So, you see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So you've got, okay, Humanity Forward, rewrite the rules, human-centered, sizzle reel, the introduction. Let's see if they have, okay, endorse UBI, retake control of their data with a link. All right. Let's see. Data as a property right. Okay. Each of us generate data as of now, data is owned by the people who collect it. We've also seen it abused. So what they want is a right to be informed, okay, when it's collected, the right to opt out, right to be told if it has on you, the right to be forgotten, right to be informed. Okay, it has a bit of a GDPR kind of vibe to it, which for those
Yeah,
of
you
you,
know what?
right?
Uh,
Yeah, for those in the
yeah,
audience who didn't get the privilege of spending a year working on GDPR, it's a European regulatory general data protections regulations or something requirements around a lot of these things about informing people, storing it in a very safe way, making sure that people have a right to remove it at any time, all these kinds of things. So that seems pretty reasonable. And
what I'm
then,
seeing here actually is
mhm,
I'm a little more optimistic. I think a lot of folks have sort of heard and read about data as a privacy right, and when I see it written about in Twitter or elsewhere, it turns
mhm,
into, and then we should get paid for our data. And I
right,
don't see that here, at least. And I think that's the part that concerns me a little bit, because once it becomes that transaction, uh, I'm worried about, like I said before, wealthier people opting out, the pools being smaller,
right.
the payoffs being smaller, and that sort of probably harming the creation of content on the internet, and the way that it's funded right now.
Yeah, this one seems quite sort of
Kind of like the
sober.
standard, yeah.
Yeah, in that it's because I think the problem is if you go further and you say, and then therefore we want a data check that's different than UBI, I think there's a lot of great things that people get for free that they wouldn't. And maybe the value of getting some free services may actually be more than like a small $2-3 check in the mail every month kind of
Yeah,
thing, you know?
that's what I worried about. Is it's like it's so small, but it throws off everything. This actually makes me really excited to see that it's this and how closely it resembles GDPR and what California is doing, because that's one of the biggest challenges right now. Is California is going to come out with their own regulation. It's going to be really tough to manage on a state by state basis, and
Mm-hmm.
so having some federal regulation, and this puts Andrew and Humanity Forward in a really good position to go and be a advisor to lawmakers to do this at a national level.
Yeah. So that sounds pretty. I have a feeling Andrew has some good advisors and he's thought about this enough, and he I think he gets some of the tough trade-offs. So that seems reasonable. Activate new voters, mainstream the ideas movement through podcasts, and launch and support pilots. Yeah. all good. I mean, I will say this around Humanity Forward. I wonder if part of the challenge is because of this Corona thing. It's sort of they had to do like at least a temporary pivot with this relief work, but it also took a little bit of the wind out of the sails. Like I was expecting a much bigger, almost like, okay, there was Yang 2020 and then Humanity Forward, and that's even bigger. And it doesn't feel like that yet. What are your thoughts?
That definitely took the wind out of the sails. I think Andrew rightfully would have still kept it, any 2024 plans and thoughts very much on the back burner. It's about beating Trump. He said that from the beginning. So what can he do to help that? And especially what could he do to not hurt that movement? And so I think getting behind full-throated support with whoever the presumptive nominee is, I think was going to be his, the thing that he was going to be focused on no matter what. And he'd be campaigning. I mean, ultimately, how much is Andrew going to be planning to be the day-to-day of Humanity Forward until the election? I was hoping it would be little so that he could focus on helping to beat Trump, which was a big focus of mine as well. So I don't know that changed it, but certainly took some wind out of the sails. And I think I've seen a couple of folks on Twitter and the Yang Gang be like, "Where's the Yang Gang go lately? Like I miss you guys." I think coronavirus has just gotten everyone hunkered down, maybe focused on other things, understandably so. So the sooner we get out of this, the sooner we can sort of start to rebuild the excitement around the movement, not just for 2020, but whatever happens after that.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely, we're kind of in this strange kind of state where we're not dormant. There's still plenty of Yang Gang interest and activism, but we're also not we're not doubling down the way I thought Humanity Forward would be. And in fact, I have to say, I love Andrew, and he's been very gracious with his time being on the show. And I just love talking to him. He seems like a really great guy. I will say I am a little surprised the support for down ballot UBI and sort of Yangian platform candidates has not been more aggressive and more visible. Like I know his first endorsement was Jermaine Johnson, who I love as well. There's a lot of Jonathan Herzog in New York, great guy. Worked for the campaign. We shouldn't. There's not like payback, but I mean the guy, like he's proven that he believes in the vision. I think Herzog has. So I was, I don't know. I guess I thought Humanity Forward would have endorsed like at least 10 candidates by now.
I don't know all of the considerations generally with an endorsement. And in this situation, I think I heard Andrew talk about this. Like they want to endorse where they think they can win, where they think they can make an impact, where they think the incumbent or the GOP opponent is so bad, that they really they don't represent the movement or anything even close to it. So I think they do have to pick their battles. An endorsement doesn't come cheap or easy, and it has costs, especially if it doesn't go the way that they want it to. It doesn't have to be a win. And I don't remember if there was specifically for Andrew talking about these things, but I just imagine there's more considerations, and I'm sure more will come. Coronavirus probably has delayed some of those because he can't be out on the trail. He can't go and join folks that he likes and is sort of just slow playing and deciding when he'll actually come out with his endorsement. And probably also spacing them out even in normal times is wise, just to get a little bit more of a media hit, not to seem like he's, his endorsements come cheap and he's just like doling them out like candy.
That's fair. And in the last time he was on the channel just a couple weeks ago, he talked about trying to figure out, sometimes a person's running against a candidate that is actually pretty good, and so then it's like, well, do you try and kind of dethrone someone that's more likely to help the movement? And then you talked about putting together like a survey or a questionnaire for people to fill out, and then so there. I agree. He shouldn't just be like, "Oh, are you from for UBI? I automatically endorse you." Like, I don't think he should do that. But one endorsement, it's April. Dude, suspended in January. Like, I would have had hoped for one endorsement a month by now.
Yeah, I would think that there could have been more as well. But I also like I don't know. I'm having so many utilitarian thoughts now these days with coronavirus and everything else. So if I think like they took a week off after they suspended the campaign and then got to work on Humanity Forward,
Mm-hmm.
what's going to have the bigger impact? Even a dozen endorsements or putting everything into Humanity Forward. I would argue Humanity Forward probably is going to have, pack more punch from a national level, from media side, from getting attention, and maybe getting really influence to some decision makers. So
Yeah.
yeah,
So it sounds like you're gonna give him a little more slack.
I just I don't know all of the sort of criteria and considerations, but I generally like to give people the benefit of the doubt. Andrew, I'm going to give it to him here, but I think that's fair, and I certainly for Jonathan, who I've been supporting as well,
Mm-hmm.
Jonathan Herzog. I would think Andrew is going to come out in favor of him. I don't remember the details of who he's running against, and uh, what his chances look like and what Andrew's endorsement will change for him. Because it's like, if you think about it, Andrew's his support is national,
Yeah.
right? And so he's not going to say, "Hey, everyone nationally from California to New York support this New York person," but then support someone in Oregon and support someone in Kentucky. Like, there's a finite amount of resources that people are going to send. So
Yeah. So I mean, Herzog is running against Jerry Nadler, who is a pretty influential Democrat in the House, and I suppose you could argue, wow, a guy in his 15th term in Congress who like ran the impeachment. Yeah, you may not want to make enemies with him.
yeah, and
Yeah.
this is where Andrew might have the conversation with John and be like, "Listen, I I'm looking out for the movement too, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
if he makes a misstep here, that could do a lot more damage than even if Jonathan were to win, it could cause some damage. So or some backlash for Andrew or for the movement. So I think there's some 4D chess here that I'm gonna
Yeah.
give him the benefit of the doubt that he's playing, or at least just he doesn't know, like, as a political amateur here, he might just not know all the right moves, and it's better to wait and make the right one after you've made all those calculations.
Yeah. All right. I'll give you Herzog, maybe because of the Nadler thing, and like that's like, poking a bear in the face with a stick or something. Um I do like Herzog though. I do think he's like a really bright guy, and he's a good guy. But I'm guessing there are other candidates. Like, have you done any, looked into Mike Breuer running for Senate in Kentucky? What do you
Yeah,
think of that guy?
I mean, I've watched his interview with you, and I've seen some of his other
Mm-hmm.
things. I've been supporting him, obviously bringing on Scott Santins, who
Mm-hmm.
uh,
The
I'm a
Godfather.
yeah, exactly. That means a lot, and he has the authenticity, right? So like that's something that Andrew has in spades, and
Mm-hmm.
drew me and many others to him, and so I see Mike having that. I think people say, like, I'd vote for a doorknob over Trump. It's like over
Mm-hmm.
Mitch McConnell. Probably a similar story, but Mike seems really authentic, and I just don't know Kentucky politics well enough. But he seems like he probably his message and his everything about him will resonate with Kentuckians.
Yeah.
But Mitch McConnell has brought a lot to the people of Kentucky at the expense of maybe everyone else in this country. You could argue, but he's probably done some good things for Kentucky, so he's got a lot to run on. I don't know what that actually looks like when you get to the statewide race.
Yeah, there's there's certainly a lot of fun folks who are shaking things up. We've got Heidi, I think, from Oregon on the show tomorrow. I remember interviewing her. It's always there's this like before New Hampshire and after New Hampshire. Oh my God. But I remember interviewing her before New Hampshire, and God, we were all like, do you remember the 8% national poll in Emerson when we were 4th? And it felt like we were just hitting escape velocity. Do you remember that?
I do.
Oh my God. I was over the moon. And I thought, oh, this is just like Obama 08. This is happening.
You know what? I will say thank you to you, because I do feel like you kept it real all of the time. So, when I was watching you on a weekly basis, and even earlier on, whether it was interviews or just you doing your own research and just saying like, if we're not getting between 5 and 10%, I don't remember when we were looking at what time periods, you're like, I just don't see it being possible. And that, took a little wind out of the sails for me, for my excitement, but I needed that. We needed to like temper our optimism. Certainly we had our moments where you see that 8%. And of course I messaged that to all my friends immediately. Like, this is it. This is the moment. But in the back of my mind, had to, make sure I was checking myself a little bit too.
Yeah, that was tough. I remember seeing that Emerson thing, and it was an outlier. And I think I was hoping that all the other pollers just had some fundamental bias, and Emerson was closer to ground truth.
But we saw that multiple times, where the ones that were more online saw higher support of Yang. The ones that were phone lines, had lower. So there was always this little bit of hope. It's like, can he get the turnout? Especially with the caucus, that was just going to be really, really tough.
Yeah. I mean, I think the Bernie supporters experienced this too, to the extent that for Bernie, the young voters did not deliver. Like, they did not come out in the numbers they needed to. And I think, yeah, that's right. And it's not a new thing. Every time someone's like, no, the youth vote's going to, maybe with Obama, he had a pretty decent turnout with the youth vote, but he kind of had strength across the board. But I would also say, in terms of all of the Yang Gang online energy, you wonder, okay, was it that maybe New Hampshire and Iowa just didn't have a lot of Yang Gang, and maybe had we held out for Super Tuesday, Yang Gang would have shown up more? But I don't know, man. It's because even like, I thought the Democrats abroad primary, which is the one I participated in because I'm working overseas at the moment, I thought we were gonna do really well, and I was like one of 80 people that voted for Yang in that primary, and I was like, what the hell? We get more than 80 people on the goddamn live stream for Nerds for Yang.
I mean, I did not get to phone bank until pretty late, like very close to Iowa and New Hampshire. The number of people who, like, they're voting for the person they know. I probably had a 5-minute conversation with a person about Andrew Yang and he's like, yeah, I like him. I think he was probably a Biden person. I like him. Like, I don't think he can win because he's gay. And I was like, so like, he doesn't know who the downstream candidates are. Like, he's mixing up all of the names. Like, how much did he actually know about Andrew Yang? Maybe he'd heard his name, but he'd heard Pete's name. He doesn't know who's who. He knows Joe. Everyone knows Joe. I had great conversations with people, but no one was having their mind changed from the person that they were most familiar with and trusted. Especially at a time where they weren't willing to take risks.
Yeah, I mean, that's been borne out by the fact that we have Biden as the nominee. If that doesn't scream that the voters wanted familiar, they wanted safe, they did not want to take a chance, Because you could argue like, okay, if you're not going to go with Yang, there were other candidates that were kind of interesting. And here we are now with nominee Biden. How are you feeling about that?
I actually said this a long time ago. He was my second choice to Yang as president was a Biden Yang ticket, even though I knew Yang as a VP was a long shot
Mm-hmm.
under Biden. Andrew had signaled for a while, talked about the conversations they had. Joe Biden gets it, fourth industrial revolution. And I do believe Biden is a good guy, one
Mm-hmm.
of the least egoistic running right now for president.
Yeah.
I still feel that Yang would be most influential in a Biden administration. So his ideas would, have the most legs, regardless of sort of where he was working. He would influence Joe as president as well as the rest of the administration, and it would set him up for sort of a future run, whether it's for president or for something else. And so he was always my second choice,
Mm-hmm.
or like for a very long time, because I was excited to see what Yang could do if Joe won. So I'm okay with it. Like Bernie, I admire Bernie in many ways. I think he's a good guy. I think he wants to do good things. I don't think it's ego. I don't think it's power. I disagree with many of the ways he wants to approach things. It's one of those where like the
Mm-hmm.
downstream effects and will they work and will he get anything done? But I'd say probably my biggest hesitation with him is that I think it's his way or the highway. I don't think others can be as influential when he has his mind set on something. So I'm excited about Joe, as excited as one can be. I actually wanted to ask you because I don't know if it was on your show. I mix them up because I see so many things with Andrew. Was asked about like what position he would want in the Joe Biden administration.
Mm.
I don't think that was on your show. It was on
No, it was
something
not
else
on mine.
recently. And he said like a new cabinet position, Secretary of Technology and the Future. I don't remember
Uh-huh.
exactly how he phrased it. Um,
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I mean, I think I will say this: I would not be surprised at all if Biden won that he would give Yang a very significant role on his team, and whether that's labor or commerce or czar for basic income or secretary, head of the new restored office of technology or secretary of the future, whatever. Like I could see all of these things, or secretary of like experimental policies, like, Washington 120 kind of thing. So that would be cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think like if Joe wins, Yang will have a prominent position. There will be, I don't know that UBI will get passed, but there will be pilots. There will be a number
Yeah.
of pilots, and we're going to have more evidence. And then in 4 years, we have a much sort of a leg to stand on to make that the cornerstone of Andrew's policy, or if someone else runs, like it's going to be a little bit hard to deny because as we've seen in so many different UBI like experiments around the world, um, there's a lot of positives, and it's hard to, even if you don't think about the technological disruption, you think about how that sort of reframes things. The one thing you mentioned, commerce or labor secretary, it was always a little bit tough for me to envision Andrew in those roles because like he's looking to sort of completely reinvent the system,
Mhm.
and it's hard to imagine doing that as sort of as a secretary of those areas. You sort of have to work within the existing structure to an extent. You can certainly try to innovate, but like a massive disruption, which is what he was trying to do, or like a redefining of the rules, I think that would be tougher. So
Yeah, I mean, for labor, I could see him pushing for, and maybe this would be in education, but like trade school apprenticeships, like just kind of getting people off the you have to go to college or nothing track.
mhm.
And then for commerce, basically that. But maybe that's part of revenue and not really commerce. My concern is less about the role within the Biden administration, but more about whether there would be a Biden administration. Like, I'm not convinced that Biden is coming across as a very strong candidate right now.
You're saying like in the midst of coronavirus or just generally?
Before, I was not super pumped about him. Like just watching him in the debates, watching him at his rallies, watching him not take interviews, and the interviews he took, he kind of fumbled through. You know, they didn't feel like I didn't feel like, wow, this is a racehorse. You know, this is a thoroughbred. I felt like, wow, this guy was always a little shaky even 20 years ago, and now he's less strong. And then he's going to be going against, if anything, like no one will ever accuse me of being a lover or defender of Trump, but he can campaign and he can fill an arena and get people fired the freak up. And I would not say that about Joe Biden.
Agreed. But if you think about, and I agree, I don't think he's a shoo-in by any means. Andrew was the only one that I was confident would beat Trump by a landslide if he ran. I think he just would have turned out. We would have brought people over from the other side, or turned disaffected voters over. But I think about the primary. Like, you could have said the same thing about Joe in the primary, and here we are. And so people still vote for their party lines. Is he going to get a huge turnout? No, but I think about the people I know. I think about my parents. I think about other moderates I know, fiscal conservatives who really don't like Trump. Maybe they like the economy. They certainly wouldn't vote for Bernie. But if it was Biden, they're going to go. Maybe not super enthusiastic, but they really don't like Trump. And I think that there's enough of those folks that's like, and these are people that didn't vote for Hillary or voted for Hillary and hated themselves for it, right? They were just nervous about Trump. And these are people that, and the ones that sat at home and said, I don't want to vote for either. And now they're disgusted with Trump. They're worried about Trump. Like, maybe the economy was good, but everything else he's doing didn't sit well with them. And Joe would, some return to normalcy, and they were okay with that. Like, we weren't going to turn out the youth vote for Bernie to a huge degree to sort of rethink everything anyway. So if we're not turning them out for Bernie and we don't turn them out for Biden, that doesn't really change that much.
Yeah, I hope you're right. I hope basically the same thing that got Biden the nomination gets him the White House, and then that would be a fantastic opportunity for Yang to kind of increase his influence and be helpful in a Biden administration. I definitely feel like the two get along. I see that Mindful Skeptics is joining us, so I just want to add him to the stream. What's up, boys? How you doing?
What's up, Tom? What's up, Rez?
Hey, boys.
So, boys, what are your thoughts, man? Like, we were just talking about how, well, basically, I was saying I'm not really super enthusiastic about Biden. I'm certainly going to vote for him for sure, but I worry that he will have a tough general election. And Erez was saying, well, you know what? Like, maybe the people just want kind of a return to normalcy, and the same thing that basically the Democrats on Super Tuesday wanted. And maybe that's all we need. And then there you go. Andrew gets an interesting role that sets him up for more kind of, opportunities down the road as well. What are your thoughts?
Best case scenario, we hope the people that, I can't say Americans, I'll just say the people that are smart enough to go vote, because we're a significant portion that just doesn't vote. And it baffles me, because people have died for this right and continue to die for this right around the world that don't have the rights that we're born with here. If you're born here, but if you apply for citizenship, it's a arduous task. It's an expensive task. It's a decade-long journey to become a citizen. And for someone to disrespect someone like that have made these sacrifices to earn our rights that we're born with, if you're born here, to not vote, I think is very disrespectful. And that's what we mostly are, unfortunately. I don't know. I don't think Biden inspires enough people to bring out a record turnout. That's my biggest concern, is it'll be the lowest turnout. And I don't know how long. That's my biggest worry, is low voter turnout. And Trump has his base, but I don't know how inspiring Biden is. It's going to be about, to me, it's all about who he picks for VP. It's going to really make it or break it for him. We're going to be voting for the VP way more than we're going to vote for him. That's how I see it.
That's a very good point. We actually don't know who's running against Trump because we don't know who the VP is, because that's just gonna be just such a rock alongside Biden, hopefully.
Yeah, I'll be voting for the
Strong
VP.
rock.
So who do you guys want? Who do you think Biden will pick for VP, and who do you want him to pick for VP? Erez, you want to start, and then we'll go to Boyce.
Well, should we just stick to female candidates, because he has said that he's only going to pick a female candidate? So let's narrow it down a little bit.
That would be a great one for the who you think he will pick, but you could still want someone else for your second answer.
I mean, of course, I wanted Andrew, but that was, a bit of a hopeful optimism that wasn't probably that realistic. Although I thought about it, like, he would have brought him some incremental voters. He would have and he wouldn't have hurt his chances. So I didn't think it was out of the question. And I think if Biden felt confident that he didn't need, because it's like the other alternatives are not that wonderful. Like Joe Biden has the African American vote pretty locked down. So he, like, when you think about the other options, who they're going to bring that he isn't currently turning out, I still believe that Elizabeth Warren is probably the most likely, or one of the more likely, because that would bring more of the progressive wing over, maybe even more of the Bernie, like the people who liked Bernie and Liz would latch on to her and just say, like, all right, well, maybe she's going to be very influential. She could, then be a shoo-in for president the next round. So that would be my vote. Or I would say,
so your prediction will be Warren.
Of the national candidates, of the other ones that ran for president, it's Warren. I think there's other candidates, statewide that I'm just not as familiar with, that didn't run for president, that are certainly options too.
What do you think, Boyce?
I think Biden is a product of the machine, first and foremost. And that means he will do what they tell him to, which means he's going to play identity politics to the hilt, which means it's going to be Stacey Abrams or Harris. There's only two options if he goes by what they tell him to do with political predictability.
I would have said that as well, and especially if it was anyone else. But like I said, because he has such a strong support from the African American community, I'm not saying the establishment won't still push him in that direction. It doesn't seem as necessary for him in order to turn out that vote.
Yeah, but the DNC isn't as smart as people want to give him credit for either. So I really think they're dumb enough to say, let's double down on a minority female to check all these boxes off. It's the same thing we're doing with Tulsi before she stepped down. She was their minority female. They were trying to check boxes to make her the DNC, little darling of the DNC. And she stepped out and said, no, I'm going to support Bernie. She wasn't establishment enough for them. And that just tells you they played their hand right there. They really want to check off boxes more than they want to care about policies. They just want to be in control.
This is an awesome panel because I disagree with both of you. So now we have 3 predictions
Outstanding.
for VP.
Well, come on, Tom, let's hear it.
I'm going for Klobuchar. And the line of thinking is that I kind of am persuaded by Erez's explanation of why we are here with Biden, which is like we wanted the safe kind of return to normalcy. Klobuchar is, as in my opinion, as safe as it gets. Like she's very credible. She has a lot of experience. Midwest. She's a woman, so that's good. But she doesn't sort of turn people off the way, let's say, a Warren does. Yep. She doesn't have sort of the kind of complicated prosecutorial history that Harris has. And she's probably a little like Abrams is interesting, but hasn't really been proven on the national stage the way
she's never won an election.
Yeah,
so I agree.
So maybe we go with the other thing is I worry an Abrams or a Harris pick could energize a lot of Trump voters who really have a strong aversion to anything that looks like identity politics, and this would look like it. And so, like, even maybe some of the political calculus would be a Klob would be a little safer.
I think that's interesting because you're also, are you thinking about the best candidate to win the election?
Of course.
And like and in both those cases, and of course I considered those options too, and Joe Biden is also very strong in the Midwest,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where Klobuchar is very strong. So is
Mhm.
it also just like a doubling down where he might not need them unless the polling numbers show like it's still too close in the Midwest between him and Trump, who also does well there, and so Klobuchar helps put him over the edge in those key swing states that he needs.
Yeah, maybe he thinks Klob will help in Wisconsin, in Michigan, Ohio, those types of places.
Her numbers, I don't remember. Somebody shared. She won a lot of races, but all those races were very lopsided. Like she was the presumptive winner for like from a fundraising standpoint, from like all these other things. So and I like her, but I think she appears stronger in the Midwest than she might actually be. Although I get the appeal of her. She's sort of like also like a little normal person in ways. So
I will say this, like, as some people watching this know, I have some MAGA people in my family, and when they see Warren, it's like showing a bull like a red cape, right? It's not quite like Hillary, but Warren really animates them. And so that's why I'm not thinking, I think Warren would potentially, she would bring maybe a lot of progressives, but maybe the progressives will want to vote Trump out no matter what. But she might activate a lot of fired up kind of,
on Twitter, I see a lot of people who say they're not voting for, progressives who say they're not voting for Biden. So I like, part of my reasoning is, does this actually bring them out to the polls? Maybe they will anyway, and they're just mad right now.
Yeah, that's what I think it is. Just people airing out their grievances, trying to posture. It's peacocking on Twitter. I give it very little credence because, I'll be damned if I vote for Biden. But when you're in that booth and you got Biden or Trump, punch me in the nuts. There's no way.
If you go to the booth, to your earlier point, how many people don't vote at all, and how many people are just, their protest is not going to the polls and voting third party. It is just forget it. I'm not going. And yeah,
if you're ultra progressive, I just can't understand how November 2020 would come up and you're like, you know what? I'm going to stay home and I'm going to give Donald Trump another 4 years to basically tear apart what's left of the ACA.
Yeah.
Give sort of corporate special interests whatever they want, and just kind of continue doing tax cuts for the wealthy. Like, that is the most anti-progressive thing you could ever have. I get it. Like, I know why. I've heard some Yang people are so pissed that they're going to stay home, but I don't know, man. I just feel like I guess maybe that Biden has a tough call. It sounds like there's not an obvious choice for him because, like,
I think it's going to be a state.
Yeah, but then you lose.
I think it's going to be state by state, right? It's what are the states he needs to win? Where does that make a difference? So, like, what we think might not matter that much if we're not in swing states, and it's really just trying to influence on the margins because that's where these elections are won.
Yeah. So if you think about like Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and then Florida, maybe. Then you think about Warren, Klobuchar, and like Harris or Abrams. I'd like to go with the Klob. I feel like
I think that's fair. I think if the other states are not up for contention,
right?
If you're trying to win,
it makes sense to double down in those areas where she's probably going to help him push him over the edge.
Yeah, if you're actually trying to win, you go with Klobuchar. She doesn't ignite the right.
Yes.
There'll be record turnout for them voting. Just be like, Trump's got it. Klobuchar and Biden, whoop-de-frickin-do. And it might not inspire the hatred to show up as fervently as before.
Yeah.
Yeah, the progressives have to be at least be happy. The ultra progressives have to be happy. There's a woman on the ticket, and like they'll hold their noses and go and vote for Biden and say, I'm really voting for a woman.
Yeah.
Period.
I think you'll get the coastal vote.
That might be
The coastal vote is more progressive, which will be, I guess, you give consolation prize. Hey, there's a lady, like.
It would be historic. First, would be the first woman vice president.
Yes,
that's
absolutely.
a pretty big deal.
Now,
it is progression. It is progress.
Let's.
Fast.
I think all of this conversation was certainly very relevant 2 months ago. Now we've got a big, tsunami that fell in the middle of it. That I think it's probably impossible to predict what the effects of coronavirus are on the election, on campaigning, on Trump's, approval ratings, whether it's MAGA or moderates, how he has handled it to get to where it is now, and whatever happens afterwards, and if that's on him, perceived to be on him, or I don't really know.
When you think about that lens of how like the world's kind of topsy-turvy right now, and then you also think about those VP picks, I would still prefer Klobuchar as VP in a world where Corona's like dragging on and the world's kind of like completely upside down. Like, I don't know if Warren or Harris would be better in the foxhole in like a kind of quasi wartime situation. I think Klobuchar's a fighter. I think she's got grit. I think she'll work her ass off, and she won't like try and do and kind of do anything too crazy, and just get shit done.
I mean, I agree. I don't think she's as polarizing as the other candidates, per Boyce's comment. Like, she won't ignite the right. And so ultimately what we need someone is a, leader of all of America that people can look to and feel somewhat comforted by, and, trust that they are taking care of us and leading us out of this crisis.
Well, I will say this too, as far as the Yang gang goes, Amy Klobuchar's healthcare plan most resembles Andrew Yang's. And I think the UBI would be addressed.
So in like a corona crisis, I would not be shocked if Warren trained most of her energy on saying these stupid pharmaceutical companies, these terrible insurance companies, which they are. I mean, I agree. They're not saints. But, Warren's approach is always like kill the corporations, right? They're the devil, right?
She demonizes people, yes.
And Harris, I think Harris, you know what? I think what she would do, she'd be running for president from the first freaking day.
Yep.
And I don't think I don't know if she would. I don't know if she's a workhorse. I feel like she's more of a show horse.
Also, did she burn that bridge with Biden after the first?
Well, yeah, with the whole busing thing. That's true.
And it's a lie, first of all.
Yeah. I mean, it's
a lie.
That didn't go over well. So yeah, I think she's going to be polarizing, and he needs to go with the pick that's.
All right, well, guys, it is 9 o'clock over here, and I just realized that I have not had dinner with the family. So I have a feeling I can almost feel my wife like stewing downstairs, like not thrilled with me right now. So I'm going to need to wrap up this stream, but I want to say for our first like sort of potluck panel, I think this was a really fun conversation, and we're going to have to get you guys back on again. So thanks for coming on.
Well, Tom, I host a Yang Gang Hang on my channel every Sunday night in the evening here, which would be like crack of the morning for you there. But I'm doing this every Sunday, doing a thing called I could just call it a Yang Gang Hang. Anybody can come in. I put it in the comments section, the link. Anyone can come in and bring up anything they want. I like this type of discussion.
Yeah. So for those who are not familiar with Boyce's channel, Boyce, tell people a little bit about your channel so they can learn more.
Yeah, this is my first time on Nerds, man. This is awesome. First of all, hello, Nerds. I didn't do the proper.
That's right. Hello, Nerds.
Hello, Nerds. Yes. But yeah, I'm the host of the Mindful Skeptics podcast, and I just do nothing but yanging. And now I'm working on our network. We're doing a network of all the Yang influencers. We're gonna get busy. and we're
Right
gonna make
on.
something happen. We're gonna challenge the TYTs. We're gonna challenge the Hill. We're gonna put them
love
on
it.
their heels.
I love it.
And so that's what
I love it.
I'm literally, that's what I was doing when you emailed me. I was actually working on our website. I'm building the website out. I'm learning a new skill set. So I'm just a home care. I'm a PT. So physical therapy. So I got to work in the hospital next week in the COVID-19 floor. So 12-hour days.
Yeah.
Stay safe, man.
And I'm taking one of my shirts and I'm making my own mask.
Ah,
Love it.
there you go.
I'm
Love
gonna
it.
get that done.
When Andrew tweeted yesterday about the antibody test that they're working on, or whatever link it was, as like, once someone has it and is immune and they're safe, they should have a math hat as that should be the indicator. Math hat or math pin. And,
That's right.
and everyone will have one eventually.
All right. Thanks, Tom.
Boys, good
Guys,
meeting
I
you.
love
Thank you, Tom.
Cheers.
And Arez, thanks for coming on and supporting the channel. Boyce, thanks for all the content you create and the network you're putting together and the work you're doing for people in the healthcare profession. You guys are the heroes of this movement right now.
It's a rough gig, man.
Yeah.
I feel prepared for it because I was in the military where I've been trained for chemical, biological, and radiological warfare. I just got to shave this thing on my face off.
Yeah, I'm gonna imagine they're gonna want that trimmed a little bit.
I don't have to. They have the hood, but
that's right. I've seen those.
Play it safe. Yeah, I'm excited to see the new look.
Yeah. We'll have you guys back on soon. And for all you guys watching, don't forget to like this stream, or if you're watching it on replay, please like it and helps the content get discovered by more people. And then go check out Boyce's channel, Mindful Skeptics Podcast. And Arez, thank you for your support for so many in the Yang Gang, and we will see you all again soon. Goodbye, nerds.
Bye, nerds.